Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Ms. Lynch, welcome to the Judiciary Committee.
Thank you.
Appreciate the service you've given in this country. I'm impressed with your qualifications, and I hope I can support your nomination. It's important to hear what you understand your role and duty will be. Do you agree that when the constitutionality of a law is challenged, the Attorney General has a duty to defend that law if reasonable arguments can be made?
Senator, I believe that one of the first and foremost duties of the Department of Justice is to defend the laws as passed by this body. Okay.
Now, I'd like you to answer these questions. I'm trying to get through a number of them. I think you can answer most of them yes or no if you can. If you are confirmed, will you commit to enforce and defend the laws and the Constitution of the United States regardless of your personal and philosophical views on any matter?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Attorney General Holder answered that same question in the same way. The Justice Department had made reasonable arguments that the Defense of Marriage Act is constitutional, but then the Attorney General chose to stop making those arguments because of his personal views. And by breaking his promise, he cast doubt about others who make the same commitment as you did today. Now, I don't doubt your sincerity. We've met together, and I have a high opinion of you. But is there any more assurance that you can give us on something like that?
Senator, it's my view that when it comes to the position of the Attorney General and the role of the Department of Justice in defending the statutes as passed by this Congress, the issue is not my personal view or any issue of bias or policy even, but it is the duty and responsibility of the Department of Justice to defend those statutes. Certainly, as we've seen, there may be rare instances where, and again, I was not involved in that analysis, but there may be certain circumstances where careful legal analysis raises constitutional issues. But I anticipate those would be few and far between. I also think that should we reach that point, if there is a matter, it's a matter that I would prefer to have discussion about.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I'm concerned that the administration has exceeded its lawful authority in several ways in an effort to avoid working with us up here in Congress. Now, I understand why they might not want to work with Congress from time to time, but unfortunately, the Constitution requires us to work together. And that the Justice Department has actually facilitated this pattern of behavior, some people believe. The Department has done so in a number of ways, in exceeding and even contravening lawful authority in the programs it helps administer, such as with the latest executive actions on immigration, in purporting to provide legal justification for other agencies to ignore the law, as apparently occurred with the transfer of Taliban terrorists out of Guantanamo without notifying Congress, which is an obligation, and in taking some extreme litigation positions, which by my count, the Supreme Court has unanimously rebuked a record 20 times. Given these disturbing patterns, how can you assure us that you'll be independent, that you'll say no to the White House or other executive branch agencies when they wish to act beyond the law as it's written?
Senator, I think one of the most important functions of the Department of Justice is to provide a legal framework, if it exists, when questions are raised.
Right.
But consistent with that, every good lawyer knows you must also provide the information that indicates that the legal framework may not exist for certain actions that someone may want to take. Every lawyer has to be independent. The Attorney General even more so. And I pledge to you that I take that independence very seriously.
Well, you did that in my office, and I appreciate that, because I think you'll be a great Attorney General if you'll do that. Last August, you gave a speech in Switzerland in which you praised Attorney General Holder's initiative to limit mandatory minimum sentences only to some of the criminals who Congress said should receive them. But prosecutors, including even the Attorney General, do not have authority to decide that entire categories of defendants will not receive a sentence that the Congress has mandated. Isn't that another example of using prosecutorial discretion to really, in effect, change the law without Congress?
Senator, with respect to the material that you're referring to, when I did give that speech, I was referring to the Department's Smart on Crime initiative, which seeks to manage another intractable problem of the large number of narcotics defendants and the limited resources that we have to handle those defendants and prosecute them.
I want to help you with that.
Yes, and prosecute them effectively. In fact, in my own experience, both as an assistant United States attorney and United States attorney, we've had to deal with similar issues in the Eastern District of New York, we've had tremendous issues with narcotics importations over the years, and we've had to work out ways of resolving those cases. Many of them go to trial, but we also have had to prioritize the cases that we will seek mandatory minimums for and those which we will seek guideline sentences for. But importantly, with respect to the Smart on Crime initiative, as pushed out and has been implemented in the field, every prosecutor, from the United States Attorney on down to line assistants, are encouraged to still consider cases that might fall into a category where initially you would not seek a mandatory minimum, but consider whether they would be appropriate. Okay. And those cases have occurred, and they will continue to occur.
Okay, I understand. As currently written, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or ECPA, requires only a subpoena for law enforcement to access email that has been opened, even though a search warrant would be required for a printout of the same communications sitting on a desk. To make matters more complicated, ECPA is silent on the privacy standard for accessing data stored abroad. Without an actual legal framework in place, this puts the privacy of American citizens at risk for intrusion by foreign governments. In the coming days, I intend to reintroduce the LEADS Act, which will promote international comedy and law enforcement cooperation. Will you commit to working with me on this important subject? Because it's important we solve these problems.
Senator, the subject of electronic privacy is central to so many of our freedoms. And as you point out, in an era of ever-changing technology, we have to be vigilant to make sure that we are not only providing law enforcement the tools it needs, but protecting our citizens' privacy. And I certainly commit to you to working with you on this important legislation and all the issues that will flow from it.
Well, thank you so much. Trade secrets are among the most valuable assets for American companies and currently are protected under federal criminal law by the Economic Espionage Act and by an array of state civil laws. Unlike other forms of intellectual property, however, there is no federal civil remedy for trade secret owners. I will reintroduce the Defend Trade Secrets Act in the coming days with Senator Coons to provide an efficient federal remedy for trade secret owners. Do you agree that trade secret owners should have the same access to a federal remedy as owners of other forms of intellectual property?
Senator, I think that the issue of trade secrets, again, particularly as American technology becomes ever more complex and becomes ever more a target from those both in the U.S. and without who would seek to steal it, is an increasingly important issue. And I look forward to working with you to consider that statute. I'm not familiar with the provision that you raised, but it certainly touches on an important issue of making sure that our companies and their technology are protected.
Well, thank you so much. I am today introducing legislation to help victims of child pornography receive the restitution that Congress has already said they deserve. The Supreme Court said last year that the current restriction statute enacted more than 20 years ago does not work for child pornography victims, and this legislation will change that. I am joined by more than 30 senators on both sides of the aisle, including 14 on this committee. Do I have your commitment that under your leadership, the Justice Department will aggressively prosecute child pornography and use tools like this legislation to help victims get the restitution they need to put their lives back together?
Senator, throughout my career, I have expressed a commitment to prosecuting those who would seek to harm our children, be it through child pornography or the actual abuse of children, which often go hand in hand. You certainly raise important issues about how can we make these victims whole, and I look forward to working with you and the members of this committee in reviewing that legislation as well.
Thank you so much. Now, I recently read a powerful book, read it in one day. It's titled License to Lie: Uncovering Corruption in the Department of Justice. The author writes about many things, including the debacle that occurred in the misguided prosecution of Senator Ted Stevens, which I thought was out of this world bad. I was one of the people who testified as to his character, and he was a person of great character. And as you know, he lost the Senate race because of this type of prosecution. I know that case. Ted Stevens was a dear friend of mine, and I testified on his behalf, as I said. Only after he was convicted did we learn that the Justice Department prosecutors intentionally hid exculpatory evidence that could have helped his case. Now, these were not mistakes. They were corrupt acts that violated every prosecutor's duty under the Brady v. Maryland decision to turn over exculpatory evidence so that the trial will be fair. Now, I recommend that you read this book, because if even half of it is true, and I believe it is true, you have a lot of work to do to clean up that department. Will you consider doing that for me?
Thank you, sir. I will.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Before I call